Have you ever got one of those days when your mind is just like... So while you try to convince your head to do something, you start doing a side activity? And I'm not talking about something useful like cooking, reading, or something like that, because that actually needs some sort of effort. Nah, I'm talking about searching in all documents in your computer and checking your music list, or what I was doing, checking the games you have in the Epic Games Store. I don't want to start any weird discussions about where to buy your games on PC because I really couldn't care less. But you know, they give free games every then and now. And thanks to that, I have some games that otherwise I'll probably never got into. So, listening to my therapist's advice to try and take advantage of these scenarios, I decided to make a small section where I talk about these games just because I like them, and because I'm still completing Dave the Diver. I didn't expect it to be this long, but if I keep the rhythm, you'll have the video maybe next week, I like to think. But in the meantime, playing The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog made me want to continue the line and play another visual novel, / point and click adventure. But since Murder by Numbers lasts 20 hours, and I really don't want to start another game without ending the previous video, I'll talk about another game that got my attention, this Silent Age. I watched this game 6 years ago from the point of view of another content creator. So, now that I'm doing this, I think it's time for me to make my own video about it. But this time, I'll make it a little bit different. This time, I'll try to get you in the atmosphere of the game. Tell me in the comments if you like this approach in more serious games. The name's Jasa, and let's dive into it! Let's get some context. We're Joe. We see he worked as a painter, but when the war started, he enlisted to the army. But once it stopped, he had nowhere to go, so he got into any job he could get, until the day he got offered a job as a janitor in a company named Arncon. So here is where the story starts. In 1972, our partner Frank left a note saying that Mr. Hill wants to meet with him. We enter to the supply room, change the bulb, take some gloves, and our access card. With this, Joe hops onto the elevator to the 22nd floor. He appreciates some modern art, talks a bit with the secretary, and enters Mr. Hill's office. He tells Joe that thanks to his hard work, he gets a promotion. Now he has the responsibility to also clean the level 2 areas of the facility, also saying that Frank decided to leave. With the new card, it's time to reach the lab's level 2 clean, when Joe notices an extravagant amount of blood all over the floor. The first door is locked with another level's card, and the second one is broken. But using the gloves, it's possible to fix the panel and enter the room. Checking the lab coat, Joe finds a handkerchief, going out to get the evidence. Trying to explain it is useless. They only give him a band-aid, so it's up to us to determine how to use it. Pressing the left button with the band-aid, Joe gets across the closed door, only to see an old man severely injured. In the conversation, he explained that he is a time traveler. He got shot by someone, and now he needs Joe's help to save the present from a virus that came from the future. He asks Joe to meet his younger version to avoid the end of the world. He hands the time machine and dies.
Help!
Joe freaks out and screams for
help
help.
in here!
The security of the facility sees him and takes him to the police station. A pair of cops start the interrogation. They hand over the time machine, and in an effort to explain what's going on, Joe activates it, getting into the future, where everything is in ruin. Joe finds the corpse of someone who hung himself and the officer who was interrogating him. With a katana and a hammer, Joe gets outside of the building on the 2nd floor. And using a rope, he gets down the tree, going into a light beam, which allows him to travel again. Traveling between the present and the future, Joe manages to get inside a room in a hotel with a window big enough to get through and leave the station. And now it's time to discover the time traveler's identity. In order to do so, it's a need to get inside the hospital where his body was taken. And after getting rid of zombies, it's time to enter the hospital in the future. With some use of the machine, Joe gets to the corpse, discovering the name Reginald Lambert. Once he finds his archive, using a restaurant ambulance, it's time to meet him. On the road, Joe starts thinking about everything that has happened, from the doubt of how Lambert didn't burn the virus, or how does the time travel works, thinking if he just leaves copies of himself or if it's even possible to avoid the testing. But seeing that he is not not getting anywhere in his mind, it's time to focus on the road. Joe arrives to a swamp, and using a pump and a non-taken trophy, he fixes a boat ready to cross the swamp. Once entering into the front yard, he realizes the warning of crocodile weren't real. So, in order to avoid a certain death, Joe uses some scissors to cut the chain link fence and get to another area, getting the electricity working froze a fish. And once with it, Joe manages to destruct the crocodile, and with a chainsaw and some odd alcohol, he gets into the house. The house is kind of dark, so using some books to start the fireplace, we get a better look at the room, allowing to perceive a roof, the one highlight a trapdoor leading to a basement, where an old version of the machine was resting, almost complete. Traveling back and forth in the future, we get to open a door using an axe, and here we get the first weird detail. In a notebook from the future, we see a diary entry saying that in July 18th of 1972 has passed 2 months since someone broke his door. That's why in the future the doors were made of metal instead of wood, but I'll talk about that later. With a bottle of wine, we open the secret door behind the shelves, finally reaching Dr. Lambert. After Joe explains to Dr. Lambert the mission given to him by his older inventor, using the time machine as evidence to back up his words, Dr. Lambert finally explains what has been happening. He was part of Archer, the same company Joe worked as a janitor, but Dr. Lambert was the head physicist in the project of the time machine, tempted to be used as a weapon in the Cold War. First to travel to the past and stop the conflict before it began, but they discovered it was impossible to travel before the creation of the machine. So the plan changed to get weapons from the future, but some time travelers got lost in time and never came back, and the ones that came back brought a lethal virus with them. Dr. Lambert didn't want to have anything with the downfall of society, so he left, but now he realizes that he should have stopped them. And now, it's up to Joe to travel in time to yesterday, the first day of the adventure, to destroy the computer with all the research data and stop the occurrence of the patient zero. And after driving all the way back, he gets to the previous night. After talking to a bartender, stealing some quarters, and loosening some screws, Joe managed to get inside a vent, and with a gun borrowed by the future bartender, he shoots to the controls that were stopping him to enter. But by doing that, he also shot a person which was trying to enter too, being the future Dr. Lambert. Joe enters the lab and gets into the time travel machine. Now, he just have to destroy the computer and it will be done. Looking through the labs, he finds Frank searching in some files. Joe asks him if they can grab a beer when all of this is over, and Frank only says yes without paying too much attention. Joe hears a weird noise, and when he investigates it, he realizes the time machine has already been used. But maybe, if he destroys the computer, he can still make a change. After misleading a scientist with an apple, Joe gets what is needed to destroy the computer. After escaping his older version, he gets to the place where the Dr. Lambert dies. But surprisingly, he is still alive. He faked his death to the previous version of Joe so he can talk with him, destroying the machine and helping him getting the machine to the year needed to find the other time traveler and stopping him. Joe arrives at the distant future, but this time the travel was different. He felt beaten up and the machine broke. Searching through the place, he sees this future is even more wrecked than the one he knew. He finds the corpses of the lost time travelers. Even one got so beaten up that got himself into a wall. After sharpening a machete, Joe gets to a cave where lays Frank almost dying. He begs Joe for some water, and after he takes a sip, he reveals the truth. He is spiced by the Soviet Union to get intel about the weapons, but after not having anything to report, as a last try he stole the time machine. But he really enjoyed his time being friends with Joe, so as a last thanks, he tells him how to fix the machine so he can save himself. But at the moment Joe gets out of the cave, he starts coughing. He storms out to the time machine and fixes it, going back to his year, only to realize he was the zero patient all the time. With a manual he found in the locked file cabinet, he starts the cryogenic tube, knowing that is the only way to save the world. And like that, Joe freezes. But this is not the end. 10. Joe wakes up in a hospital bed with two other people, one more perturbed than the other. But once he gets a code from the panel, he gets out to what apparently looks like a psychologist's room. There, the Dr. Emma Brown explains what have happened. The year is 2012 now. The people started to deoxygenize the people from other companies, and thanks to Joe destroying the computer, there were no files about them. That means the people we saw before were the other people in the tubes, and the one saying he saw all of it was the one frozen with his eyes open. Dr. Emma tells Joe that they'll help him with physical therapy and even help him get a job, and the virus that almost extinguished humanity back then now was a common and easily treated sick. And with that, the Odyssey ended. He got a common life, completely alone, just like the beginning, but now being even more alone than before, just like a castaway. And now, I just wanna say something. In all the game, there were only a few things Joe could change about the future. The most significant one was the tree, but all the time paradox was that before his trouble, he already caused that effect, like we saw at the beginning with the injured Dr. Lambert. That could mean that at the end of the day, Joe didn't change anything. A future without sky, completely down at the line. It's destined to occur no matter what. Thanks for sticking to this part of the video. If you like this style of videos, I'll make more from time to time, but with nothing else to add, the name is Jazz, and until the next one.